And welcome to episode 132 of Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. Here we are live on YouTube, so if you're here, give me a comment, say hi, tell me where you're from, tell me what the weather's like. And today we're going to be talking about DIY photography equipment. A couple of weeks ago I was showing off a little kind of homemade gadget, and so that sparked the idea of what other homemade gadgets are people using. So we've got a couple of people put in bits and pieces, so I'm going to go through some of those and hopefully spark off some ideas. We can sometimes, photography can feel like quite an expensive habit to have, so the more you can do where you can get pretty amazing effects without actually having to fork out a fortune, the better. So yeah, say hi, let me know you're here. So like I say, here we are live on YouTube, unless you happen to be watching the recording, in which case make sure you subscribe so you can be notified of future episodes. Make sure to click the little notifications bell as well, and tell your friends. Invite your friends along. If you're interested in photography, I'm sure you've got a friend or two who's also interested in photography who might well benefit from these podcasts. I can see we've got a couple of people in already. So Pat says hi everyone from a fairly dismal Somerset. Meg says good afternoon everyone. Russ says good afternoon from a damp and chilly Thornbury, South Gloucestershire. April says hi everyone from a cool cloudy Long Island, New York. Rosemary says good morning, we're waiting for the sun to come up to see what the weather will be. What weather we'll be having today. I think it's supposed to be fairly dreary, but it is November. Jack says hello from sunny Florida. Oh well, so we've got sunshine somewhere in the world. So far, everybody's talking about it being a bit dreary. And John says hello from Columbus, Ohio. Nadia says hi everyone. Robert and Anne, howdy all from Texas. And Maggie says hello everyone. A bit dark and dreary here in southwest Scotland. It is a bit, although it was a beautiful morning. Went out for a walk this morning just around the town. Have to wrap up a little bit, but it was rather lovely. But then the rain came on. So yeah, here we are then. So what I'm talking about today is the notion of DIY photo equipment. As I say, fine. If all you're doing is taking photos with your phone, then that's fine. You've got your phone anyway. It's not really any extra expense to have the camera. But even then, there's things you can do. You can buy, quite often, a lot of the modern phones these days, you can buy all sorts of extra equipment, little lenses and stuff to put over. And things can start kind of building up a price fairly quickly. And especially then if you have a bridge camera or a DSLR or a mirrorless camera, and you're wanting to kind of expand what you do with your photography, modify the way the light comes in and hits your subject. All these kind of things can really start adding up and get quite expensive, especially as the camera and the lenses themselves are pretty expensive to begin with. Of course, there are millions of things out there to solve every photography problem you might ever have at a cost. So everything that gets shown to you today, or you go and find, somebody out there has already made one and is charging a lot of money. However, you can very often get exactly the same effects for an awful lot less money. And that's what I thought we would explore today. So, to give you a little bit of a reminder for anybody who wasn't here about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was talking about a fashion shoot I did, and what I did was on the end of the flash on on my camera, I used this as a little modifier. So essentially, all it is a business card box. And several years ago I ordered several hundred business cards, and they came in these little plastic boxes. And the little trick that I used, I again discovered it from someone else, was if you scored a little X into the bottom, it created this, it allowed you to then push the flash through, and then you could stick the top part just on the top like that. And now my fingers are completely trapped in there, right? But then essentially then, when the light goes into this, it then spreads it, makes it wider, makes it bigger. And so when you're kind of photographing light, you want a bit more than a single directional light. You want to kind of create a bigger light with your flash. Something like this is really useful. Now you can go and you can buy a molded piece of plastic which will cost you £20, or you can find an old business card box which cost me absolutely nothing, other than 20 seconds to carve an X into the back of it. And so it's along that line. How can we actually sort of set about bits of DIY equipment? So we've had Rosemary, Viji, and Russ have all sent in some really interesting ideas. So in fact, Rosemary sent 2. So, which is rather wonderful. So what we're going to do then, I think, is we are going to start then with Rosemary. And let me go find what Rosemary wrote here. So Rosemary started off with a message to me saying, "This equipment share has been just the swift kick I needed to make a particular diffuser I'd seen demonstrated on YouTube. In the tutorial I've followed, the fellow used an empty wooden picture frame, covered it in parchment paper on both sides, and used it to diffuse flash photography for small, the flash for a small product photography." And this is a really good idea, because this is one of the problems. Sometimes you're doing product photography. So product, generally speaking, we're talking not very big. It might be food photography, or it might be you're just photographing a mug. Last week I was talking about photographing jugs and what have you for a potter that I know. So there's all sorts of things whereby, but you don't necessarily, now I was using big equipment and I was sort of staging indoors, but sometimes you just need a small space. But you still want to diffuse the light. You want to have that softness of shadow. And we talked before plenty of times about the idea of that it's the quality of shadow very often is really defining how a picture turns out. And if you can soften that shadow, but in order to soften that shadow, you need to have a larger light source. And in essence, the smaller the light source, the harder the shadow. So a flash or sunlight, even though the sun is a million times bigger than the earth, because it's so far away, the sun is as small as the tip of your little finger held at arm's length. You can blot out the sun with the tip of your little finger held at arm's length. So it creates a very, very hard shadow. Whereas on a dull day or a soft light, you window light, you've got, now something which is maybe 6 feet by 3 feet or something like that. It's a very large light source and you get a beautiful, soft, creamy shadow to it. So a lot about light modifying. If you might have an off-camera flash, you might have something, to be able to give you a lot of light, but it's a small light, so it gives a hard shadow. So how do you soften that shadow? So it's then about the idea of then shining a light through a piece of parchment, a piece of paper, a piece of tissue, something not fully opaque but not fully transparent either, and the light hits the paper, maybe something like a bit of tissue paper or something. And a little bit of tissue paper or something like that. The light hits it. I mean, if I hold this up to the light behind the corner, you can see the light kind of coming through. You can see I can kind of create a shadow with my hand behind it. So we know the light's coming through, but the light that's now coming through will be much softer on this side than the light coming directly at it. So that trick then, and how do you keep a little piece of tissue paper in place? So this is what Rosemary was playing with then, was the idea of creating a frame. And she goes on to say, the parchment had a beautiful quality of light, and I used a discarded flat box rather than a picture frame suggested, so a 0 cost score. Now, what I'll do is, let me see if I can find Rosemary's pictures, and I'll put them. Okay, see a couple of extra comments. Oh, April says, "Go Rosemary." Rosemary says, "I understand parchment paper is also known as baker's paper or baking paper in other parts of the world, or greaseproof paper," says Russ. So yes, you can use that kind of stuff. So if I just click on this and flip over to here, so you can see then what Rosemary's got then is she's got a box, she's got baking paper or parchment paper or greaseproof paper sitting there, and she goes on to say, "So I folded the flat red box to expose the white side and cut out the bottom. The biggest issue I had was finding a tape or glue that would adhere to the parchment paper, which is coated in silicone. Of course, it's designed to be non-stick, so that makes sticking it particularly difficult. None of them would stick to the brand I used, although I managed to get a rubber cement to hold it in place long enough to mask the full outer edge with the masking tape. Who knows how long it will hold? Or mostly it tends to only need to hold just long enough, doesn't it? I refolded a second flat box with the white side exposed to use as a reflector. So we can see here then that what she's got is we've got the box with the parchment paper or the tissue, yeah, but the paper kind of on one side, and oh right, what did you say? The other side of the box was to be used as a reflector as well. All right, so kind of bounce the light. And where are we? So, right, I folded the second flat box with the white side exposed as a reflector. So one side's being used to push to diffuse the light as the light goes through the diffuser. The other side is to actually just use a white surface to bounce some of the light back, so it's not all heavy shadow on one side. So what she can show, what she then goes on to show then is here's a pair of baby shoes which haven't got, so this is your kind of before shot. So she's got a white surface, and you can see here the flash creates a very hard light, hard shadows, and while you can see it's a pair of baby shoes, it's not as softly lit as you might like. So then to show you then the actual setup, so here we go. So we've got the flash over on the left, we've got the box here which has been cut out, and the parchment paper has been folded over and stuck so that the light is now going to go through the tissue on this side, diffuse, have a softer light on these shoes, and then she just put the other box, the white side of the box, on this side to act as a reflector to bounce some of the light back. And when you put it all together, so that's the light, the flash going onto the box, pushing the light through and lighting up the shoes and bouncing some of that light back, and you end up with this. Now, I think we can all agree that's a considerably better photo than the original. So if we just do a little kind of compare, you've got that's just straight with the light, with the flash, no modifier, and then that's the soft light with the modifier that she's created. So I think that's just brilliant. I really like that. I really like that, Rosemary. So just to kind of give you that shot again, to show you the two setups. This is in ambient light, so you can see what it's like, and this is what it's like when the flash goes off. So you can see here the light going through, and then using this one as a bounce, as a reflector. So really great little use of, and to create a little homemade studio, which isn't costing you a fortune. Once you've got the box there, once you've got it stuck down, you can use it again and again. So smug points to you there, absolutely smug points there, I think. Yeah, that was a really good one, Rosemary. What else we? Oh, Russ says a bit of product placement there for Costco. April says, Rosemary, the tissue paper that you wrap presents with would adhere with Scotch tape. Yeah, so again, this kind of thing. But I think it's one of those things that you can play around with and experiment. Whether you're using tissue paper or greaseproof paper, parchment, some kind of, or thin diffuse material, sometimes even a kind of lace type thing can work. So it's certainly worth playing around with different materials to see what's going to work best. And some of them you can even play around with creating little slits and patterns to create little shadows across as well, which can also be a bit of fun. April says, that's great difference, Rosemary. Meg says, very creative ideas, and Rosemary saying, thanks, I wish I could take credit for the idea, I found it online. No problem with that. That's perfect, and that's kind of the point of this whole exercise. Why I was flagging it up in the first place is the idea that there are millions of probably millions of YouTube videos, certainly thousands of YouTube videos, if not tens of thousands of YouTube videos of people who have set about making the most bizarre modifiers for the cheapest amount of money. Some get quite complicated, some you've got to have serious DIY skills to be able to do, but there are a lot that require little more than a little bit of Scotch tape, sellotape, a piece of cardboard, and a little bit of fiddling about, and away you go. So it's worth going and checking. There's no need to kind of reinvent the wheel as such. There's other people out there who've already done this. So yeah, hopefully that, although we've only had sort of three people sort of send in ideas for this one. What I'm hoping with this podcast is that it will inspire everybody who watches it to think, you know what, actually that maybe looks a lot simpler than I thought, and maybe I could go out and try something. And you can try some of the ideas that Russ, Viji and Rosemary have sent in, or you can, like I say, just after you watch this, go out on YouTube, check out what other people are doing, and play, absolutely play. Right, okay, so what I'll do now then is, so let's show Rosemary's second one then, and then I'll move on to Viji's. So Rosemary then talked about a second piece of DIY kit is a rolling clothes stand, about $15 that she bought a couple of years ago. So let's show you that, just clothes rack, clothes stand thing, right? So cost $15, and then she's bought some clips as well. She says, actually I bought two of them to use in tandem. For example, one might hold a diffusing material and the other might hold a reflective one. So having found that actually this is a really good one, she's got two. So it's a great size stand. You can see that up against the wardrobe here, so it's pretty much about 2 meters high or thereabouts, certainly 6 foot tall, and it's looking pretty solid. It will you can pick up these kind of cheap clamp clips quite easily, and it allows you to hang material on it, and you can use that material. You get your material for backdrops. I've got some fleece you can go and buy from a material store off the roll, 2 meters of black fleece or something like that. Fleece is quite good for absorbing the light rather than reflecting it. Tends to be quite cheap, rolls up nicely and doesn't crumple in the same way that a cotton sheet does. I've got another one, we've got another few meters of white fleece as well, which I sometimes quite often use as backgrounds if doing headshots. So you can see how that would hang off this quite nicely. But what Rosemary's saying is that you can also hang a diffuse material. So if you had a thin sheet, you could have that there and sunlight will go through it. Or you might put a reflective material there as well. You might hold if you bought an actual reflector, or again, you can use a white sheet on the other side like she did with the box, just to bounce light back. So she goes on. Rather than securing the base to the uprights with screws as intended, I've left them detached so they store fairly flat against the wall. Okay, so she can kind of slot them in and out rather than to make it fairly easily. The stands are not heavy duty, but they serve well for holding fabrics. So not good for putting really heavy stuff on, but it doesn't need to be. All it needs to do is hold something thin. Well, the biggest downside is that the base of the stand sometimes interferes with the placement of the light stand legs or the base of the rolling table I sometimes use to hold objects. That's always going to be problematic. So you can see here that the base comes out a little bit and kind of moves into the space, but that's always going to be a problem. I mean, the stand that I have, the backdrop stand I have, came as part of a backdrop stand kit, but these stand on a tripod, and so the tripod light, also always come out. So there's always a little bit of kind of moving around. There's that old phrase that photography is 1% inspiration, 99% moving furniture. And anybody who's had a go at doing this kind of anything at home will understand that one completely. So she goes on. The stands are just the right width to hold an oval 5-in-1 reflector. So you can see here, so you can buy these reflectors. I've got one sitting over there, in fact, and these things are great. Again, not expensive. You can pick them up fairly cheaply, $20-$30 the most, I think, and you can. You've got this bit, the bit in the middle is a kind of diffuse material, so allows the sort of sunlight to sort of go through and create shadow. But then you've got these zip over bits, so you can have white on one side and gold on the other, or you can turn it inside out and you can have silver on one side and black on the other. So you actually have 5 different options, all on the one thing, which kind of pops out. And then you need to find a YouTube video to watch how to fold it all back up again, because the first time you do it, it's a nightmare. So Rosemary goes on, in place of a commercial diffuser, a frosted white shower curtain can substitute. So here you go, shower curtain, absolutely perfect. So that can work if you've got the light bouncing onto it, it can work as a reflector, or if you've got the light behind it, here the light comes through, you can see the shadow down the bottom, but it's the light, so that's really good too. What else have we got? The clamps are inexpensive, all purpose, and come from a hardware store. You can see how these modify harsh sunlight. So Rosemary's then done a couple of self-portraits just to kind of quickly show. So this one then is without. This is against. So she's standing out in the just outside the front of the house, and this is direct sunlight coming onto her face, creating it quite hard. But there's a soft reflection here where it's much softer on the left. Now this is then with the diffused light. Stand back a little bit further and you come back and you can see just what a difference that makes from that to that. So we've now got that soft, that light, that hard sunlight which we had here, which is blowing out the highlights, which is really creating hard shadows, diffusing that light through the shower curtain, making it really soft. Love beautiful soft shadows. And then because I don't know whether you've got another reflector or a wall or something on the other side, which is creating bounced back light on this side as well. So the quality of that is really quite something special. So she just goes on to say an assortment of plain bed sheets, curtains, lengths of fabric from the fabric store can be hung over the rail. Image M shows, where are we? So this one's a backdrop here, where the texture curtain to make a backdrop, or even if you really want to get fancy, have some kind of here's a drape with Christmas twinkly lights which you can put on behind, and so you can see that as I say, you can use it as a backdrop, you can use it as to put diffusing material or reflecting material. And for the sake of $15 for the stand, and probably another $10 to get 3 or 4 clamps or something like that, cheap clamps, and away you go. So brilliant. Thanks ever so much for sending those ones in, Rosemary. Smug points, lots of smug points to you for that. I think it's a great idea and something which most people can probably get hold of. You might even have something kicking around in the house already that you can use, or as Rosemary says, you can pick them up really quite cheaply. You don't need something really strong and sturdy if it's just for hanging a bit of light. Something like a shower curtain isn't going to tip the whole thing over. Slightly different if you're going to be doing outdoor shooting and you might want to have something held down with the wind. At that point, actually having a wider base is quite good, because you can then put something heavy on the wider base to stop it because if you've got a big sheet across it, it will catch the wind. So outdoor photography is a slightly different thing. But if you're talking about doing indoor photography or just somewhere close on a non-windy day, absolutely perfect. Couple of comments here. Rosemary says fleece is a great idea. I love the long wrinkly feature, as ironing sheets isn't my favourite activity. Yeah, no, absolutely. I remember the first backdrop kit that I got, which gave me the stand, and it had this cotton sheet with it, and it's just so crinkly, and I didn't want a crinkly background. And even if you iron it, that's fine if you're in the house, but then you've got to go out somewhere to do the shoot, in which case you've got to fold it up, in which case you've got instant wrinkles in it all over again, and it was just a nightmare. And I cannot remember where the idea for fleece came, but fleece is just brilliant because you can roll it up and it just doesn't have those harsh lines running through the middle of it, leading to hours in Photoshop trying to take it all out afterwards. Russ says the reflector on the frame is a perfect backdrop for headshot portrait photography. Yeah, I'll go along with that. April says cool, love the Christmas lights. Russ says with the right camera settings, the lights would make great bokeh backgrounds for portraits. That's true as well. In fact, I'm going to come on to that in a moment, Russ. Maggie says, would lace curtain allow interesting texture on the subject? On the reflector, I mean. Not so sure about the reflector, but certainly the lace curtain as a diffuser, I think, could create some really nice patterns as well. Um, and Rosemary says, April, Russ and Maggie, I love how you've taken the ideas and run with them. Well, yeah, that's it. Once you've got a starting point, you can then kind of grow and develop these ideas as well. So brilliant. Cool. Okay. Well, thank you ever so much, Rosemary, for sending that in, both those ideas in. That's really great. And hopefully getting everybody to get the creative juices flowing. You know, what else can we do with these things? So what I'm going to talk about now then is Viji. Viji sent in, now what she did was she created a little, let me see. This is the photo she did, and to show you her setup, so we got the little panda over in the distance. You can see the picture in the card here, and what she was done, she's kind of created a little kind of cardboard extension tube and cut out a heart shape on the end of it. So DIY extension tube with heart cut out, needs to be perfect. Needs to be perfect though. Okay, so you know, a little bit of fun there. Part of the thing is if you cut out heart shape and you put it right against your lens, then actually it's too close. You're not going to get the actual outside, the shape of the heart. It will just blur out. So by putting it kind of at the end of a tube, it allows you to then make sure that you get this sort of soft heart shape around the picture that you're going for. So fun little idea there from Viji, so thanks for sending that one in. However, what this did though, I will say, is it sparked a memory of mine, and to tie in with what Russ was just talking about, bokeh. And bokeh, or bokeh, or there's a whole bunch of different ways of saying it. I tend to say bokeh, B-O-K-E-H. And B-O-K-E-H is a word which is basically about the quality of the out of focus background. So when sometimes you look at photos and you have a really lovely kind of close-up of something, and there's a really soft quality out of focus blurry background, and it just really adds to the mood and the feel of the subject. So you're enhancing the picture by having the out of focus background. But there's qualities of out of focus. So now, there's an interesting thing here, and this was what was sparked by Viji's heart shape. And that is, if you put a heart shape in front of the camera lens when you're photographing something, but you use a very, very wide aperture to give you a very narrow depth of field, it means whatever you've got in focus, what's in the background, if you happen to have little lights in the background that would normally give you little kind of out of focus circles, it will take on the shape of the heart. Now, let me tell you what I mean here. So, what have you got? You've got your camera, and so that out, and what you do is cut out a heart shape from a piece of paper. And now, where do we go? Here, so you can see it, right? And if I put this too close, if I put this right up against it, that's going to be too close. The camera's not really going to be able to see that. However, just a little bit of distance, and it starts to, you start getting a blurry area. But, okay, what I need to do now is show you what I mean, because I'm going to talk about it without. So, couple of quick photos I took last night. Sparked by this idea. So some of you may recognize little Woody here on the background. So a quick photo, and what I've got here in the background is a jar of fairy lights. Okay, so now they just happen to be sitting there. You could take them out, you could spread them out, and in fact really what you need to do is you need to do what Rosemary did with her backdrop and create something like this. But what you do is you have it so far in the background that it's out of focus. Okay, so let's go back to here. So what we've got is, because I've got this on something like f2.8, that these tiny little lights, which as you can see are only just, you know, little fairy lights, they blur and they spread out, and what we get is these round circles which are reflective of the which are the inside shutter kind of thing. So when you go click, so we've got that all becomes smooth and round. However, if you then decide that what you're going to do is you're going to cut out a piece of paper and hold it. Now, you've got to be kind of careful about getting the size right. I found that this one in the end was too big. So I'll show you a couple of variations on this in a minute. So what I then also did was I created a smaller one. And then I played around a little bit with how far forward and back I needed to put it in front of the camera. Now, at this point, I've just kind of got an elbow on the table holding it, moving this one backwards and forwards, because this isn't, obviously, and it's completely unedited, it's not a brilliant photo. This is about just getting the idea of what it is. And what you can see is now when we look at the bokeh, it's got that heart bit. You know, some of these, depending on where they are, have got that kind of dip from the top of it. Some of them are starting to get the corner, the edge of it. So actually by modifying by creating a little shape that it's shooting through, it's affecting the quality of the bokeh. Now, what's also happening is because I'm shooting through a piece of paper, the paper itself is catching the edge and it's creating a natural vignette around it. So what I thought, well, I wonder what happens actually if I put, let's have a little group of hearts. And so I put the camera up, and to be honest, actually, I say group, but in the end, I think I ended up pretty much mostly putting it over the 2 or 3. And what I found with these is you get a slightly different shaped heart. Now, we've got little gaps of light coming in where, you know, it's not sort of lined up completely. So it ends up, but again, you can see that these little hearts here, and you can see even the little corner bits here where it's torn. You can really see that up there, but you've got torn bits in the corner because I was just very quickly kind of half cutting the heart and then pulling it out. And so the shape that you're putting in front of, these little gaps that you're creating, are then absolutely affecting the quality of the bokeh behind. And I thought, well, okay, I've been playing with hearts. Just to prove that it works with any other shape, I then cut out a little star. Okay, not the most brilliant of cutouts, but it doesn't matter because it does still beautifully illustrate that, here we go, that the bokeh in the background becomes star-shaped. So that's a really kind of cool, fun thing to do. And it's absolutely not costing you anything. It's the equivalent of when you're baking, I think, having the equivalent of your kind of scone cutter or cookie cutters, different shapes. I dare say if I was really fancy and I wanted to cut something out which was the shape of a Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, place it in the right place, and your little bokeh would have a little kind of reindeer shape. Might not be completely sharp, but hey, who knows? Maybe worth trying. And certainly with Rosemary's twinkly light set up in the background, could be quite fun to give it a go. So, so that's then understanding the idea of homemade creative bokeh adaptation. Is you can literally do it with a piece of paper, cut out, fold the paper in half, cut out half the shape, open it, and it takes us straight back to primary school or elementary school, where you're cutting out shapes, playing around. It's fun, this is the fun experience. When I keep saying about play is where we learn, and we lose that as we grow up. We're allowed to play and learn through play when we're young, and then that kind of gets knocked out of us somewhere along the line, usually kind of as we work our way through school. And then as adults, we completely forget that we're allowed to do that. But yeah, we can have a lot of fun with this, so do. So thank you to Viji for sparking that idea. That was yeah, like I said, I did actually have a bit of fun doing that last night. Right, what else have we got? Nadia says, great ideas. Oh, Viji's joined us. Good evening, everyone. Rosemary says, Viji, this has some fun applications. Viji said, I went to take some photos and just returned. April says, homemade bokeh. Viji says, lovely. April says, very creative indeed. And Rosemary says, there are some cool fancy scrapbooking hole punches that could be fun to shape the holes. Yeah, absolutely. If you've got different shaped hole punches, brilliant idea. Gives you an instant sort of way to sort of play around. Otherwise, you can maybe just get kind of very creative with a sort of inverted origami as such, with cutting out shapes. Right, okay. So, smug points to Viji. Next up, so what we're going to do now then is we're going to move on to Russ. And I have to say, I was fairly blown away by Russ's one here. So Russ, and in fact, for those of you who are on the Facebook group, Russ actually put this one into Facebook, and it garnered quite a lot of comments and attention as well. And he said, I couldn't wait to share my homemade accessory hack. It works brilliantly. And while I would love to take credit for it, I have to admit borrowing it from a YouTuber, Coof, or COOPH. He's got in quotes. So we can go and look up COOPH on YouTube afterwards and see whether he's got any other hacks that way. And what this then is his setup. And this is for macro photography. So what Russ says is essentially it's just using a modified Pringles tube as a flash diffuser for macro photography. This genius idea puts the light right on your subject. You do have to crank the power of your flash up slightly, but as the inside of the tubes are silver, it bounces quite to the end of the tube quite well. Like most good ideas, it's so simple, but I've been using it around the garden for a couple of years and I've become so impressed with the output. So what's brilliant about this is anybody who's done macro photography knows that your primary problem with macro photography is light. One of the problems, okay, works on a couple of different levels. Part of the problem is with macro photography is that when most macro lenses, they might say something like my macro lens is a 2.8 f2.8, but f2.8 is so shallow, so narrow a field that basically when you try and zoom in on when you sort of close up on anything, only a tiny bit of it is in focus. And that's not usually enough of it in focus. It creates a lovely bokeh effect, but there's not enough of it in focus. So you want a deeper depth of field. To create a deeper depth of field, you narrow your aperture. And so you go to f8, you go to f13, you go to f16, maybe you even go to f22 to try and get more that's in focus. But as soon as you do that, you are really reducing the amount of light that comes in. So you're just not getting enough light on your subject. How do you get more light on? Because the next problem you have is if your flash is sitting on top of the camera, then the light isn't necessarily going onto the subject because this will be getting in the way, the flash is going that way. It's really, the camera itself can end up becoming a shadow for where your flash is. And that then is what's so brilliant about this idea. So clearly what's happened is we've got the Pringles tube and you cut a hole into one side near the bottom, the flash goes up into it, and then it bounces around the silver inside, comes out the bottom. The lid itself is a very, very similar material to our little favourite box, so it's slightly opaque. If you've got one which has got a completely clear tube, you might even stick a little bit of tissue paper across it just to kind of diffuse it a little bit more. But I asked Russ about that and he seemed to reckon actually this one worked fine. The light is already diffusing a bit because it's bouncing around on the silver on the inside. So because he's managed to kind of just angle it, it's sitting there, and it's the light now, the subject is going to be completely lit up, beautifully lit up by this extension added onto the flash, and it allows you to then go get a really narrow depth of field if you want to get more depth into the macro, into the topic you're doing. And I think it's just pure genius. But what's also great here is Russ has then sent along several photos to show you just what he's managed to do with this. So this is a 105mm flash, and here we go, the bee. I mean, we've got to love a bee, and I mean, because that's another problem as well. Sometimes is you manage to get your flash, your camera really close up, but it's insects particularly love to kind of fly off you. So what you're also wanting to do is you're wanting to have a faster shutter speed, because you don't want the if the insect decides to move or fly away, or there's slight wind blowing. Of course, a faster shutter speed, great for freezing the action, but of course it gives you even less light coming in. So you're already going for a faster shutter speed, and you might be going for a narrower aperture. So where are you going to get enough light? And under normal circumstances, you're just going to end up with an ISO that's gone through the roof. So to be able to throw a whole load of extra light onto it with the power of a flash is absolutely brilliant. So That's a great shot. Here we go. Got the spider. I mean, that's really creepy. I'm not sure I really love seeing a spider just this big. Flower, yeah, start getting into just an emerge. Is that a tulip? I think that's a tulip just starting to emerge or something similar. Oh, is that a wasp or a hornet? Again, I mean, it's so close. And that's the other thing, because you're managing to get the light onto it, you then end up, well, you can use something like a 100 ISO to be able to get a really good quality image, which means you can then crop in, certainly for a web level photo, and still have the detail. When you've got a really high ISO, as soon as you move in, it becomes really noisy and grainy, and you can't maintain that level of detail. So that extra amount of light to put onto your subject is just it's an absolute genius way of doing it. So again, these really close-up petals. Well, I mean, the detail on that dragonfly is just astonishing. Got the full honeycomb eyes, the details in there. It does look like, I mean, it's such a kind of like lead glass window frame of those wings. Absolutely brilliant. Another emerging flower, and this one as well, which Russ put in. So you can see then that, you know, that wonderfulness to be able to you know, you can have the macro lens, and I got myself a macro lens during lockdown when I couldn't go out and photograph people and I was just going to be stuck around the garden. But to get that quality, I was constantly coming up against this problem of how do you get the extra light in there. So this idea of the Pringles tube, just to flip back to here, just to give you one last idea of what it's doing, is just, yeah, it is absolute genius. So full smug points to there to Russ there for that. I think it was yeah, it's a great idea, and it's really great to see the photos as well that you've created with it. So yeah, it's I'm going to have to try something similar now. We don't have any Pringles in the house, whether we get some over Christmas or not. But the thing is I think you could, you know, again, you can modify, even if you don't have Pringles, either because you're trying to have healthy eating, or, you know, you don't have them. I'm sure, you know, you can get tubes. You might be able to get something like a kitchen roll tube in a tube or something like that. And again, if you wanted to reflect, you know, maybe you put a little line of tin foil or baking foil, aluminium foil, aluminum foil, if you're on the other side of the water, on the inside. Put a tube of that and then stick your flash in. Or whatever size tube you can get, I'm sure you could create something very similar. So yeah, genius idea. Comments here. What have we got? Robert says, I love the Pringles can. Rosemary says, Russ, that's so great. I've seen some really complicated adaptations of Pringle cans, but this is wonderfully simple. I can feel the purchase of Pringles in my near future. April says, love the honeybee and the jumping spider's cool. Viji says, brilliant. April loves your work. Rosemary saying, the macro insects are just amazing, and Meg says, the great photos, absolutely brilliant. And April says, aluminum. Yes, because that's American. We have an I after the N to say aluminium on this side of the pond. Russ says, my neighbour thought having thousands of pounds worth of camera lens and flash with a Pringles tube stuck on the top was hilarious. Yeah, I think it is that, you know, I mean, some of these cameras, I mean, that's a 1DX Mark III you've got there. It's not a cheap camera. A lovely camera, not a cheap one. And so, and then, you know, your flashes are going to be expensive, and you end up with thousands of pounds worth of equipment that you build up. But then why do you want to pay thousands of pounds more for something which is going to do the job just as well, if not better? So yeah, I can see why they would have thought it was funny, but as a photographer, I get it completely. Yeah, because actually most photographers, yeah, you don't always tend to have a high income from your photography. So, okay, there we go. That's brilliant. Thank you so much to Rosemary, to Russ and to Viji for sending in ideas and sparking off lots more thoughts, and thanks to everybody who's been chatting away. Quick little reminder, if you're finding these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining, and you would like to support them, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can do it. So, a little heads up about the next few weeks. We're into December, amazingly, next week. Now, also timing-wise, both Christmas and New Year fall on a Sunday. So, at the end of this year, the podcasts won't be going ahead on Christmas Day or New Year's Day. So, the 18th of December will be the last one of this year, and then we'll start again on the 7th or 8th, I think, the 8th of January. However, we've got a few more weeks. So the last couple of ones we're going to do, I will probably do some kind of Christmassy challenge. I say Christmas, but it'd be Christmas / Hanukkah / midwinter festival / winter solstice, so whatever you want, or midsummer festival if you're down in the southern hemisphere. So there will be something like that, and what I'll also do is, traditionally we've done for the last couple of years, we've done it twice now, we're coming to our third end of year here with the podcast, so there's usually a favourite photo of the year. What's your standout photo of the year? So the last couple, somewhere around the 12th and 19th of, 11th and whatever it is, anyway, the last couple of ones of December before Christmas, we'll sort out that. Next week, however, what I'm going to do, I will just say, I'm going to be talking about a photo shoot I did for a couple of musicians. Now, it's headshots. The Galloway Players, and so he plays the guitar, she plays the flute. They are absolutely amazing musicians, but they'd only been using photos that they sort of basically taken with on their own phone, so they needed some professional headshots. Now, so I'm going to show you the headshots, but I'm also going to talk you through, because we did two different kinds. We did ones with white background and one lighting setup, and then we did ones with a black background and a different lighting setup. And so I'm going to show you the photos, talk you through what I did, and show you why, even though the poses are almost identical in both sets of photos, the feeling and the mood is dramatically changed by the light and the background. So I think that could be kind of interesting. So that's us. Thank you ever so much once again to everybody who put in ideas, everybody who's contributed to the chat. I hope it sparks off some ideas. There's so much fun you can have with photography, playing with ideas, modifying your light, and I hope it inspires you. So when you finish here, go off, check YouTube, type in DIY modifiers photography and things like that, and see what kind of ideas you get. I bet you 4 or 5 hours will pass and you'll have just be overloaded with all sorts of things. So that's us. Just last couple of comments I can see cropping up. We've got all right, that's basically everybody sort of saying thank you, good night, thanks to all, great session, fun ideas, have a great week. So thank you all, and I will see you all next Sunday. Take care, bye bye.